I, put a letter out to the community explaining what the BIMAS was and why the purpose, excuse me, the purpose of it. And I gave parents the option of opting out because I feel like that's, an important choice as a parent. Out of our community, I did have some opt-outs. I had a lot of questions and I sat and, and spoke with parents and answered their questions, and some chose to still opt out. I didn't ask why necessarily because I felt like, okay, go ahead. We'll get maybe next time, you know what I mean? Maybe next time they'll get on board. But to be honest, it's really only a fraction of the student body. So that's good, So, and mostly from the community, I hear that people really understand the why and how it's going to help.
I think similarly, all of our heavy lifts or obstacles have now become positives, so they all are now positive things. But, when we started, we're gonna do it. We're gonna figure it out. And we were all on board. I think the resistance came from fear, and we don't know what this is going to look like, and we don't know how to answer questions if we get pushback from parents. We did not get the pushback from parents I thought we were going to get. We had maybe a handful of opt-outs, and we still do every time, but it gets less and less. We offer sessions and we send letters and we communicate. One of our biggest obstacles, or one of the things we ran into, was, I was getting phone calls from emergency rooms from doctors. We sent so many students for triage that they were like, what are you doing? They called and they said, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Our waiting room is full. And I was like, I'm sorry. This is, so what we learned was we developed a partnership with Upstate and St. Joe's, and we have a district mental wellness committee, and we have representatives from those facilities on our committee. And so they help us kind of figure out when we do our triage dates, and we talk to them, they talk to us. We have sort of fine-tuned our release process and how we communicate with them. Because what we know is that sometimes a student presents as being, pretty significant on the BIMAS, and then we do follow-up assessment. And then, 2 hours later, the parent comes and gets them, takes them to the emergency room. Now they're not presenting that way. So now we tend to make phone calls if we can from the office with our support staff there. So we've sort of fine-tuned that process a little bit. We've developed partnerships. We now have mental health clinics in all of our buildings, which is helpful. And now this is our third year using the BIMAS at the secondary level, 7-12. And so our students have quite a voice, and they have things they like and things they don't like. And so we really try to work with our students to make it just a better process for them so that they're comfortable. One example would be they didn't like being called out of class. They felt a little, they had certain thoughts about like the way we went about it, or who they would talk to when that happened, or how we contacted their parents, or what we would say. And now our students are actually, and I think, so some students would get further assessed, and then, there was some conversation amongst students like, oh, this is going to happen, or this happened, not always necessarily the truth, but maybe exaggerated. So our students are actually in the process at the high school. I was telling Jim this last week, of making a video called Mythbusters by Mythbusters. And they're going to share it as part of the process this year for new students that will take the BIMAS, about why it's helpful, why it's beneficial, and sharing their own personal experiences. Because it's hard, right? Like, so if you go through that process, you go to the emergency room, you're with your parents, and it's not a great experience initially. It takes a while to get to the point where you realize we needed to do that. That was really hard. It was hard for me. It was hard for my parents, and I'm going to be mad at whoever got me here right now. But now, 2 years later, I know that was a good thing that happened, and I can talk about it. So I think that's where we're at. And so now it's positive, but those were some of the obstacles we ran into in the beginning.
I love that idea, Karrie. That's awesome. And you're right. It's not easy to sit through that whole process, the triage process of being in the hospital. I've done it as a parent and I've done it as a social worker, and it's either way, it's hard. As a kid, it's even harder.